Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the Demystifying IRB and Adapting Research in an Emergency workshop. I'm Tara. I work with the Office of Graduate Student Life and Development. GSLD and TC IRB, we're so pleased to bring you today's presentation to help make the IRB process a little bit easier for all students and to answer any questions you might have throughout the presentation. And presenting for you today are Dr. Mayra Luna Lucero, who is TC's Research Compliance Director in charge of IRB, and Eleanor Melarano, the Research Compliance Assistant and a second-year master's student in the Sociology and Education program here at TC. So thank you both so much for being here, and without further ado, I'll hand it off to you, Mayra.
Thank you so much, Tara. So I'm very happy to be here. I really enjoy these kinds of sessions because I think it provides some one-on-one feedback to students, especially as you're maybe struggling with research for the first time, or maybe you've worked on human subjects research before, but you don't know the nuances for TC IRB, or maybe you just need some encouragement to explore some options for your particular research, and you just want to know some resources that are available through TC. The way Eleanor and I have set it up is I'm just going to do the greeting, which is what this is. I'm going to pass it on to her. She's going to do some of the more detailed instructions and detailed orientation of what IRB provides in terms of resources, and then we'll bounce back to me and I'll take your questions. So feel free to use the chat. You can use the chat throughout the discussions. I can reply to the chat while it's going. Tara can help coordinate that as well. And then at the end, we'll just have an open session where you can ask me anything. So please be thinking of the questions that are particular to your work, especially if they haven't been covered in Eleanor's orientation of what IRB does and the resources we have. So I'm passing it on to Eleanor. Thanks so much. We'll check in just a bit.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eleanor. I'm the Research Compliance Assistant at the IRB, and I'm going to share my screen here because I have a little PowerPoint about demystifying the TC IRB. Let's see if I can move this thing. Okay. Okay, can everyone see this in PowerPoint format? Okay, awesome. So welcome to Demystifying the TC IRB, and a second part of this presentation is adapting your research in an emergency such as the COVID-19 crisis. So the IRB, just a little quick overview. We work with researchers to make sure that their research protocols with human subjects are in compliance with federal, institutional, and ethical guidelines. So it's designed to protect the rights and welfare of the human subject participants in research. So these are the people who make up the IRB. We have Mayra, who's the director. We have a chair, administrator, and then both a research compliance coordinator and assistant, which is me. So this slide will show up twice in the presentation, and we will also disseminate this whole presentation to your email addresses afterwards if you would like. But if you also want to take a screenshot of this slide, it has all of the ways to contact us if you have a question. You can also just Google TC IRB, and it usually comes up on Google as well. So this presentation is going to talk about a few things. First, we're going to go over who needs IRB approval, what kind of studies a researcher might be conducting that would need to go through the IRB process. Then we're going to move to a general timeline for researchers that includes city training, going through the IRB, and when you would do that in your process. The different review categories that your study may be under. The consent process, because consent is not just a document, it's a process with your subjects. And we're going to talk about submitting your IRB protocol through Mentor IRB, which is the website that is used to communicate with the IRB. And then we're going to talk about adapting your research during an emergency such as COVID. Okay, so first of all, people may be a little intimidated by the IRB process, but we're here to help, so don't worry about it. This might be you, this little owl saying, oh boy, I'm nervous about going through the IRB, but don't worry, we're here to help. When in doubt, you can visit the website, which has a lot of great information. All of the tabs at the top of the website have guides and resources, resources on how to submit, templates, if you need to follow the template for informed consent or your application. We also have blogs. There's one specifically about being a master's student going through the IRB, if that's something you're doing. So we have a lot of great resources on the website. You can just check that out. Okay, so these are a few different situations where you may be wondering if you fall under it, if you need IRB approval. So we'll go through them. The first one is if you are doing research for one of your classes, say you're in a qualitative methods course and you have to interview someone, you don't have to go through the IRB for that if it's part of the semester's coursework. The only reason you would need to go through the IRB would be if you were planning on publishing your findings afterwards, but if it's just for a course grade, you don't need to worry about it. What about this person? I'm a master's student working on my integrative project or thesis. So master's students don't currently require IRB review at TC unless you fall under one of these categories. So if your study involves more than minimal risk to participants, obviously you're going to need to go through the IRB to see if you fit within the ethical guidelines. If you are working with youth, or if you are working with another site that has its own IRB, or if the site requires that you go through IRB approval, such as the New York City Department of Education. But we recommend that you stay away from the Department of Education if you're a master's student doing your IP, because it takes a really long time to go through their IRB. So you might want to find a way to tweak your study so that you don't need to do that. If your research will be published, you need to think about going through the IRB, and also if your research is grant funded. If you are a doctoral student doing research before your proposal hearing, so just preliminary research, you kind of fall under the same guidelines that you would need to follow if you were a master's student doing your IP. The only difference is this part at the end, saying to follow your faculty advisor's guidance if you don't know whether or not you need IRB approval for your preliminary research before your proposal hearing. So what about this person? They're a doctoral student. They've already passed their proposal hearing. They're ready to do their actual data collection for their project or dissertation. Yes, you need IRB approval. All doctoral dissertation research must be reviewed by the TC IRB after you've successfully defended your proposal. And for this last person, a lot of times someone's project may fall under a case-by-case basis for the different guidance we would give you. So when in doubt, just contact us. Like if this person, they didn't go through the IRB for their IP, but then later they want to add to it or publish their work, you just need to talk to us and see what you can do about that. So this is the general timeline for researching at TC. So the first thing you would need to do if you're going through the IRB or doing any research is complete the city training and then uploading your certificate to Mentor IRB. You would need to identify a faculty sponsor as well, because we look for, on Mentor IRB, we make sure that you have both the up-to-date city training as well as approval from your faculty sponsor before anybody looks at what you actually submitted for your protocol. So it's really important to have those things. And you would also need, when you're about to go through the IRB, you would need to know the plan of your study as well, because the application is going to ask you about your research materials and what the participants are going to be going through during your study. And so you would need to know all those things before you actually submit to the IRB. So then you would submit to the IRB. Maybe we would give you some revisions that you need to do in order to maybe make your informed consent more flowing, or maybe you didn't use the correct language for your participants, because we recommend informed consent documents being around an 8th grade reading level. So I know that was one of the things that I had to change for my protocol. So then after you get approval, then you can research, and at any time you may want to submit a modification. Like for instance, if you need to add people to your study, if you're adding participants, maybe you're interviewing 10 people instead of 5 people, you would submit a minor modification, and we have guides for that on our website as well. So CITI training, CITI is collaborative institutional training initiative, and you need the certification in order to do any research. So you would go online to this CITI website, and you need to register for courses, and then you have 7 basic modules that you have to take, and then you choose 2 elective modules, and then there are also optional modules if you are interested in the Belmont report, which is about research ethics. And each model has a quiz at the end, and so you need to score an 80% or higher in order to actually get that CITI certificate. So if you've already completed CITI training at maybe your undergrad institution as part of a course, you still need to do TCs because institutions have different modules that they require. So, and you have to make sure that your certification says there's TC. So if you have questions about the CITI certification, we have a section on our website dedicated to training and certification that you need to go through the IRB, and it's called the Training and Certification tab. And it's also on this link right here. So after you've completed CITI training, you're going to upload your certificate to Mentor IRB. So Mentor IRB is where you prepare for your IRB protocol submission. It's where you can communicate with the IRB. It's where you can see what revisions you have to make. We also have, under this documentation section, we have templates and forms that you can download, such as like sample documents, informed consent templates, stuff like that. So this is how you get to IRB. You go through your MyTC portal, Student Resources, Mentor IRB. And this is where PI documentation, that's principal investigator documentation, that's where you would upload your CITI certificate and any other. So if you take the Ethics and Safety Amid Uncertainty course on Canvas, you would also get a certificate for that, and you can add that there as well. These are all of the templates and resources that we have under documentation. So we have like templates and information about working with the NYC DOE. We have IRB news and updates, and then you see here the application template. That's what you're going to use when you actually do your application. We have boxes with questions, and you just fill your answer into the boxes there. Okay, so what are the 3 main review categories under the IRB? We have exempt, expedited, and full board review. Our website has a lot of information about these different categories. If you're not sure which one you fall under, you can go to the section of the website that talks about them. We also have blogs on the website about some different categories within exempt. So consent is a process. It's not just a document. It often involves some different forms that people would have to fill out depending on what your research is. So if you're working with minors, you would need both the child assent as well as the parent or guardian permission form. If you're working with a site such as a school, you would need a site permission form. You need the informed consent form with any human subjects, as well as giving them their participant rights, which is most of the time in the informed consent form. And for more information on the consent process, you can review this blog post. It hyperlinks to it as well. So when you're ready to create your research protocol, like I said, you're going to go to the IRB application template and fill in your answers to the questions in the boxes. So your protocol will usually include 5 items. There's an electronic survey form that you fill out actually in Mentor IRB. And then these 2, the IRB application and consent documents, the little asterisk means that the templates are available under the documentation section of Mentor IRB. You will also like I said, put in your research or survey instruments. So you have to have those planned out already, as well as recruitment materials. So say you are disseminating a link to a Qualtrics survey on Facebook or something, you would have to tell us what you're saying in your post to your participants so that we can make sure you're not using like any exculpatory language, or make sure everything is in compliance. So there are different deadlines for what category review you're doing. Exempt and expedited is just ongoing. When you're ready to submit, you have everything ready and your faculty sponsor has looked over everything, you can go ahead and submit it. Full board review, you have to pay attention to the part of our website that has the dates, because full board review only meets once a month. So you have to submit your protocol by a specified date in order to be talked about at the next full board meeting. So here is this link where you can look at the full board schedule. So sometimes you might be collaborating with other institutions that have their own IRB. In those cases, sometimes you would mostly go through their IRB, and we would honor what their IRB says. But you would still need to submit an application to TC IRB and mention that you're going through the other institution's IRB as well. And this is also a case-by-case basis, so talk to us about your protocol if you're doing that. Okay, now the next section of the presentation, adapting your research during an emergency such as COVID-19. So you would want to create an emergency response plan, including looking at the TC preparedness website and going through the ramp down checklist, mapping out ramp down scenarios and maybe conducting drills to make sure that authorized personnel understand their roles, and assigning key research personnel to respond to an emergency 24/7. So you just want to make sure that all of your, if you have research staff with you, research assistants, make sure everyone's on the same page about what needs to be done if an emergency arises. Okay, so you would do different things depending on what stage your study is at if an emergency arises. So there are several different things you would do. The first one, if you began data collection before the emergency, consider reflecting on nuanced variables that may not have existed prior to the crisis, such as anxiety that your subjects have experienced, or displacement, something like that, that now impact your participants because of this emergency. And also maybe consider ending your data collection early with the intention of resuming once the crisis has ended and it's safe to go back to data collection. So if you began your study before the emergency arose, but you have not begun your data collection, you consider maybe adding things to your study. So can you even do this as intended, even if in the emergency? If not, you can still do things that don't involve human subjects, going more in depth in your literature review, doing pilot studies to improve them in anticipation of their use when study procedures can restart. And also maybe applying for grants as well. So if you have not yet begun data collection, again, you can still conduct the study. If you can still conduct the study as intended, consider maybe gaining an understanding of the federal, state, local, and college guidelines for safe study administration, or asking yourself how future research on your topic could contribute to an understanding of the different impacts of emergency situations on your subjects. So if you're conducting a longitudinal study, which is going on for a while, consider maybe reaching out to other people who you know are also doing a longitudinal study, seeing how the pandemic or the emergency has affected their research, coordinating efforts to administer similar scales to participants, comparing findings for yourself from pre, during, and post-crisis. Conducting an attrition analysis, because it may be that a lot of your subjects have had to drop out of the study and that has affected your study. Looking at how location or community specific factors due to the crisis have impacted participants, like I said before, with the stress and anxiety that may be due to them being in the crisis. and asking yourself if there are any types of analyses that you can perform that might provide information about changes in light of the crisis. So we recommend collecting remote data since it's not safe to do in-person data collection. You can do this in a lot of ways. You can use social media, you can do Zoom interviews. We, through TC, have free Qualtrics. So you can go onto Qualtrics through the MyTC portal, and it gives you a lot of different options for surveys that you can create in order to safely have people answer surveys without having to be in person. So this is how you get Qualtrics if you don't already know. It's under the Academic Technology Resources under Student Resources section of the MyTC portal. And once again, here's that slide again with our contact information. If you have any questions, you can email us or look through the website under the How to Submit tab. If you scroll down, we have guides and resources, and that is really helpful for any specific questions you may have, because along with the documents and templates we have under the documentation section of Mentor IRB, we also have a lot of those on the guides and resources section of the website. It's broken up between the subject you would be looking at. So if it's child ascent and you want to know more about that, we have a whole guide about that and the ascent process. So that's pretty much it. Myra will now take any questions. Thank you.
Eleanor, thank you so much. Great job. I do appreciate your insights and knowledge on the IRB. I did want to just emphasize one last time to just think again about your research involving human subjects. If it does involve a systematic investigation of human subjects, it will include the IRB. So that's just a general rule of thumb. So as you're reflecting on Eleanor's presentation, just think to yourself, does my research involve human subjects? If the answer is yes, then include IRB. Does my research include a systematic investigation of human subjects? Then absolutely it includes IRB. So that is just an easy way to think of how IRB is a part of your research. And again, Eleanor, thank you for that information. So we are opening up the floor to any questions you have. If you want to talk specifically about where to find some of the resources that Eleanor was presenting about, if you want me to do a quick touch base with the website, we can do that, or Eleanor can help me coordinate that. If you want to just open forum, discuss your particular research, here we are. This is a resource to you. We are here to support you in any way that we can. So please either use the chat or feel free to raise your hand and we can just filter questions verbally as well. Yes, please, Manuel.
Thank you, Mara and Eleanor. My question is about whether I'm preparing my dissertation proposal, and it's going to focus on secondary analysis of publicly available quantitative data and media data and documentary data. I'm not going to collect any new information. I'm assuming it's going to be exempt from the IRB process. Do I still need to do the CIDIT training? How do I go about getting that outcome?
Yes, so for exempt existing data, we do have a guide on our website that talks specifically about the requirements for exempt existing data. And just as you described, it is publicly available data that you're planning to access. It would fall under that category. When you are ready to submit your protocol to the IRB, there are some considerations you want to make. First, where are you in your doctoral timeline? You said you were in your pre-proposal. If you're in your pre-proposal and you're planning to access this existing data as part of your initial analysis of data that you're going to present then at your proposal hearing, that's fine. You can submit an IRB protocol at that point, but you need to be mindful that once you pass your proposal hearing as a doctoral student, you're going to have to submit a new IRB protocol post-proposal hearing for partial completion of your degree that'll go to the Office of Doctoral Studies. Why? Because the Office of Doctoral Studies needs that sort of rite of passage that you've now defended your proposal hearing, and the IRB comes after that date. That does mean you can have two simultaneous IRB protocols active. That's perfectly fine, but you just need to make sure that if you're doing this for pilot study work, you can have an IRB protocol, you can do it pre-proposal hearing, But then after that marker of that proposal hearing, you'll want to go ahead and submit a new IRB protocol, even if the data is similar. It is just one of those things you have to do as a doctoral student. But to give you some insights on how to apply for an exempt existing data protocol, if you visit TC IRB's website and you click on the guides and resources, and I'm going to share my screen in just a second. This is TC IRB's website. I just came here to how to submit. And then if you hover over it and you click here on guides and resources, you scroll down just a little bit and you are going to find a section here on submitting an exempt existing data protocol. During this submission, you're going to include the review category as exempt existing data. You're also going to include the IRB application, which will detail information about your data security plan, how you're acquiring this data, what the data includes. Some of your responses on the IRB application will be not applicable. In a rule of thumb is that if the question on the application asks you, what will you do? That usually is not applicable because you've already done it or the data already exists, so it's in the past. But you will fill out the application detailing what parts of the data you will be accessing in terms of the existing part of it and what your data security plan is. But in any case, here's a guide on how to do it. There's a sample here on how to submit an exempt existing data protocol. It walks you through the parts to pay attention to with that submission. So again, for a doctoral study, if it's pre-proposal hearing, you can submit an IRB protocol, but after the proposal hearing is successfully defended, you'll have to submit another protocol.
Thank you very much.
All right, Eleanor, should I keep track of the chat or do you want to chime in on what the people are saying? What are the people saying? Either or is fine with me, but it's a little bit tough sometimes to coordinate the where am I looking at moment in Zoom. I'm just going to chime into Eleanor, see if she has questions.
So there's a question about the IRB at another institution versus TC's IRB. So this person asks, do you have to submit the IRB application to TC as well? Is there an easier route than submitting to both IRBs?
Perfect. Thanks for that, Eleanor. So I'll go ahead and address that question. So it depends. That is IRB's favorite response for everything. It depends. If you're looking to do data collection or interaction on a project where you are serving in the role other than the primary investigator at an external site that has nothing to do with TC, you would just go with that external site's IRB. If you're doing a project where you're the primary investigator and TC is affiliated, we need to be your primary institution. And if institution of oversight, if it involves another IRB, we could engage in a reliance agreement between those two institutions. But again, all of that has to be reconciled between the two institutions. We will typically defer to a single IRB review, which basically means instead of you having to duplicate and mirror the work between two separate IRBs, we will try to have it so there is just a single IRB reviewer, but there are cases where that's just not possible. For example, in some international sites, you have to have mirrored protocols between the knowledgeable international IRB equivalent at the international site plus TC, because TC is affiliated and it's part of your dissertation work or your master's project work. In the cases of the Department of Education, you have to have the two duplicated IRB protocols. So the long and short of that is it depends. There are ways that we will try to have a single IRB reviewer, but that all is going to depend on what the study is, what the study site is, who has the expertise of knowledge for what the oversight will include, what TC's affiliation is. And without knowing all those details, it's hard to give a firm answer, but there are ways we can explore to alleviate the duplication of effort wherever we can, but sometimes it's just not possible. Sometimes you just have to do it because that's the best path forward for regulations. Michael, I see your hand raised up. I'll get to some of the other chat questions. Sorry about that, but Michael, I saw you there, so there you are. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick question, or probably a recap. In one of the previous slides, you talked about the city certification. Once we have completed that, is my understanding that that gets uploaded into Mentor IRB? And if you could just refer to that slide again, I just went a little quickly for me.
Sure,
Thanks.
no problem. Actually, I'll just go ahead and share the screen for the website. Oh, great. Eleanor, you're awesome. She got it up perfectly. So yes, just to recap, part of doing human subjects research and a submission to the IRB will require that you get city training. City training basically walks you through your obligations as a researcher. Now, remember, as a researcher, you are responsible for the protection of participants, and that's what city walks you through. Once you go through those modules in city, you will get a certificate. At that point, you take that certificate, which is a PDF, and you'll upload it into Mentor IRB. Mentor IRB, as you remember, is accessible through my TC, and you're going to put that city certificate in PI documentation, and that's where it'll be stored as record. What'll happen is when you submit your IRB protocol, your city training will follow your profile. So no matter if you're a research assistant on a faculty sponsored protocol, or if you're the PI on a protocol, it follows you. We will also make sure that that city training is updated every 3 years. So if that city training has expired, you'll be asked to take the refresher course, which is shorter than the full course. There is a section there that Eleanor talked about, but she didn't elaborate too much on because we're moving through the slides. But the ethics amid uncertainty, that training is separate. And that only involves instances when you're planning to engage in person. There's a whole other set of details revolving around in-person data collection, but unless y'all have questions about in-person data collection in the future, we can table that for now, but if you want me to talk about it, I can. But again, to answer your question, city training is the certificate that you'll get for any interaction that you're going to have with human subjects, regardless if it's online or in person, and you're going to be submitting that in Mentor IRB under PI documentation.
Thank you. May I ask a follow-up about NYC DOE IRB? Is there anything that you found over the years that that can move it along? My subjects, my participants are adults, so I know I have to still get it, but is there any trick to the? I've heard horror stories.
So here's some advice. First and foremost, I don't have any suggestions on how to move the process forward. They are an independent reviewer. They review anything that involves their site, and their site is both virtual and physical. So anything involving the Department of Education must go through the Department of Education IRB. And that's what I was mentioning before. It's the kind of protocol in that case that you would have to mirror it. They will not review your protocol until you're first approved by TC IRB. So you're going to submit to the Department of Education your TC IRB approval letter, and you're going to go through their full review, everything that they've asked you to do. If it involves online data collection with adults, there is a chance that it could be reviewed in a faster way than if it was reviewed by, or if it was including minors, but honestly, I don't know. There is lots of things to consider that are outside of my purview of the Department of Education IRB. But I can say one of the things TC has done is we've provided a plethora of guidance and tips and strategies on our website. Do they come to fruition for every researcher? I have no idea. It's all just a hit or miss sometimes, but we have also adapted our review so that researchers will use DOE templates. So you don't have to have multiple templates using our templates and their templates. You would just submit to TCIRB using their templates, which does help speed the process a little bit. Once you get reviewed by the Department of Education, they're going to have revisions. You're going to keep chugging through those revisions, get approved by them, and then reflect those revisions in your TCIRB protocol. So there is that mirrored process. I would say budget 2 to 3 months and hope for the best. Sorry.
Thank you.
I can show you a couple things on where to find guides. I'll share my screen again regarding DOE, but again, just do your best. If you go back to TCIRB's website, you click on the guides and resources. We do have a section on doing data with, or working with data and the Department of Education. This is one resource. We also have a section here on the IRB blogs, which is here on conducting research with the IRB. So 2 locations. And just as a quick tour, since I'm here, again, TCIRB's website, how to submitting a new protocol. There's a walkthrough guide there. There are these guides and resources, which are specific in terms of content. And then there's here the IRB blog, and Eleanor mentioned there is a section on master students. There's also a section on exempt review categories. You can also search within the blogs, and you can search by category and filters as well. And we also have the FAQs. In text, the FAQs is about 90 pages in a Google Docs. So if you haven't asked it, or I'm sure there's every answer that I could possibly think of. If you haven't asked it, please let me know and I'll try to put it on the FAQs. But we've tried to cover most everything that I've ever received in terms of questions. So you can also search in the FAQs here. So a plethora of resources as best as we can. Eleanor, I'll bounce back to you if you're monitoring the chat.
Yeah, we just had a few follow-up questions. I think I was able to answer them. So if you're submitting an exempt protocol, even with the existing data, you do still need city training because you're still submitting a protocol to the IRB. And do we have a list of the required modules for city training? It'll be in the PowerPoint that we're sending to the attendees.
Excellent, great. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to verbally state or type in the chat? Eleanor, thanks again for monitoring that, really helpful. Again, it's kind of like managing all the Zoom windows. But in any case, if anyone has any other questions, again, we're here. If it's particular to your own work, please let us know. Or if you'd like me to talk a little bit more about the features on the website, or if you want me to talk a little bit more about in-person data collection, which I feel should be followed by dun, 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 because that's what it feels like preparing for in-person data collection. Again, as a reminder, all in-person data collection is suspended due to the pandemic, but we are working slightly towards a possibility, lots of qualifiers, maybe one day, eventually, in-person data collection and what that will look like. If you want me to talk about that, let me know. But I'm going to go to mute for just a second. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, share your screen, or chat. Okay, looks like no questions. Either we've done an excellent job or we've scared everybody away. But I will go ahead and take the opportunity, if there's no immediate questions, to just keep showing you a little bit of resources that are available to you on the website. And please feel free to chime in. You can raise your hand. Eleanor is watching the chat. Thank you again, Eleanor, for doing that. And I can show you a bit more on the TC IRB website a little bit slower as I was kind of speeding through a little bit of it a minute ago. As Eleanor pointed out in her slides, this is the section on training and certification. Michael, you asked a question about that too. This is the information that you need, including various links on how to register for City if you've never created a City account before, and then what modules are listed under the City website for getting certified. The review categories, Eleanor also mentioned, there are sections here in the review categories that ask you, is your protocol exempt from IRB review? And it walks you through what an IRB reviewer would be concerned about in terms of where your protocol falls in the review category. In other words, if you think your study would be exempt, you can access this document and kind of go through the document to see how it applies to your particular research study. And there's one equivalent for expedited and full board. Eleanor was mentioning before about meetings and deadlines. Again, that is only applicable to full board protocols. Exempt and expedited protocols are reviewed on a case-by-case basis as they come in, rolling basis, and we try to typically get to those protocols within 7 to 10 business days. But I am going to be very direct. We are flooded in the IRB office trying to deal with the pandemic. So please, as always, we appreciate grace and consideration when you're interacting with the IRB office. We're doing the best we can, and we are absolutely trying to be responsive to researchers, but having that grace and consideration, especially now during a high stress pandemic, is always appreciated. And we also want you to feel listened to. So please, take the time to reach out to us if you have questions, and we'll do our best to respond. I brought up how to submit again. Before you begin research, if you're trying to still figure out, does your research need to go through the IRB? I mentioned this section before. Is my research systematic? Is it a systematic investigation with human subjects? This is a more detailed explanation of what I mean by that definition. If it is a systematic investigation, it is defined as research. If it involves human subjects, it is defined as human subjects research, and therefore it needs to go through the IRB. This is the timeline that Eleanor was presenting a bit earlier, and here are some details about classroom research projects and research projects that you may have done prior to your time here at TC, and you're wondering whether or not you can access that data if it's existing. Here's a description of what that means. And in that case, that would be an exempt existing data protocol that you would submit. But all of this is going to depend on the kind of work you want to do, whether it's new data collection or it is exempt existing data. A lot of the work you're going to be asked to do is online, right? Because we're all in remote settings. And here are some details on how to conduct consent with participants in an online setting. And it gives you some examples of what that'll look like and what your requirements are. So I'm going to pan real quick to the in-person data collection. It doesn't seem like anyone is really chiming in about needing this information immediately for in-person data collection, but I just want to give you a little highlight to it if you need it into the future. Again, all in-person data collection is suspended. I will sound like a broken record in that regard, but we just need to emphasize that it is suspended during the pandemic, but we're working towards in-person data collection. And even though no one's jumping at the chat to ask specific questions about in-person data collection, just so you're aware, I'm going to take you to the TC preparedness website. So just give me 1 second to get there. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. Okay, don't see anybody chiming in. So the TC preparedness website gives you some information on what you need to know when engaging in person. And this is just going to be general information about engaging in any capacity in person as associated with Teachers College, but I'm going to show you specifically information about research with human subjects. I just Googled TC preparedness, so it's the easiest way to get here. Once you're here on this website, you're going to click on campus life during COVID. You're going to scroll down and you're going to click here on research compliance and safety. So I mentioned this before. It was also in Eleanor's presentation, but the ethics amid uncertainty training modules is only applicable if you're planning to engage eventually in in-person data collection. You can get ahead of that curve if you want to resume in-person data collection when it is permissible. And in that case, you would have to do this ethics amid uncertainty training module, which will walk you through how to safely engage in person. Once you complete this, you'll upload it into Mentor very similarly to how you would upload it a city training certificate. The section here on this website also talks about the policies and procedures for what in-person data collection will eventually look like and the steps leading up to it. So there are various steps that you have to complete in order to get towards the part of wanting to engage in person for research purposes. And then here are the phases. Currently, we're in phase 2, which means that if you're part of a research lab, you can go in person to campus and work within your research lab space. You cannot interact with human subjects at this point, but you can do your office employee duties if you're a part of a research lab. We're working over the summer to move to phase 3, which will be research that has direct benefit with participants. This is going to be a very slow process. And then eventually, hopefully sometime in the near future, again, lots of qualifiers will move to phase 4, which would be any eligible research in person after all of these steps to engage in person are met. We'll be moving to phase 4. One of the biggest questions I'm asked in this context is when, and the answer I can give is I have no idea. We are working towards a goal and we will be monitoring the progress and steps and safety and hygiene leading up to that goal as best as we can. There are lots of smart people helping us make these decisions. And if you want to know who is part of this committee, which is the Research Compliance and Safety Committee, an advisory group to the IRB office, these are all the folks involved. So again, long and short of this is to say, we know that researchers want to resume in-person data collection eventually. We are working on it. It just has to be a slow process because there are a lot of steps involved. But once we get there, we'll let you know. So in-person data collection is suspended, but we're working towards some in-person data collection and we'll keep you posted as we progress. Sarah, go ahead.
Hi, so I'm planning on doing for my dissertation a study on university professors and their teaching practices. So I guess my question is there a difference in terms of like getting consent from the students between like me, say, recording a Zoom lecture and me accessing a recording that already exists that like the professor had recorded class and posted it for the students?
So again, it depends. It depends on what the professor has in terms of their access to these videos. In other words, if you're accessing the professor's already existing video recording of their class lecture, do they have the rights from an institutional education level as their job to share that video with a researcher to analyze that lecture? Or is that university property and it cannot be shared? So if it cannot be shared, then you would need to justify your access to it. In other words, you would probably have to go to a university level to access that video, what the data transfer of that video would look like. If you're just doing it for analysis and you're going to take hand notes, that's different than if you're going to be slicing clips of it and maybe presenting it at a conference. In terms of the students who were in the class as part of their typical engagement, you would want to ask yourself, and this would have to be justified in your IRB protocol, were they engaging in typical practice? Was there something exceptional or different that may have shifted the intention of this engagement, that moved it away from typical practice? Are their faces visible during the lecture? Do you have permission for use of the video and the use of their faces in the video, or can you conceivably blur their faces out? Can you just get an audio recording of the lecture, which would decrease the risk because then you don't have to deal with the visual component of it? The other part is if you are going to observe a classroom setting live, you would have to alert the students who are engaging in the typical class that you're present and that you're going to be observing this class for research purposes. Even though your focus is on the professor and their engagement in typical classroom conduct, the students need to know your intent. And they could say, I feel really uncomfortable, you're disrupting my typical classroom learning, at which point you would have to adjust your approach for that particular study procedure. But all of this will be worked out once you submit an IRB protocol and we've had a chance to look at it. So it's possible. It just depends on how you phrase it and how it's organized and how you're accessing this data for research purposes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, how are we doing with questions? Either I answered all the questions or there are no questions. Does anyone want to share any of your particular research, and I can help walk through any parts of it? Is there any part that we've talked about that was unclear? Or did you need to see additional samples or such on the website? We're happy to go through that as well. Or nothing, and we can just say farewell. And we can do that too. We can also end early. It is one of the challenges on Zoom because of course I just see your still faces and I'm like trying to emote. You're like, yes, I'm engaging, but I see no faces. But now it's nice to see. I mean, I see Eleanor's face. Thanks, Eleanor. Now I see Whitney's face. So it's always helpful when I see faces like, oh, hello, universe. I'm here.
Yes, time is such an odd construct right now. So I feel like if we can give people 7 minutes of their life back and off of screen time, I think we should do that. So with that, I will just close on behalf of Student Affairs and say if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to IRB at tc.edu directly, or you can also contact Student Affairs at tc.edu and we would be happy to connect you as well. I think Dr. Myra and Eleanor did mention it, but they also now have a Twitter account. So you should definitely follow them if you have an active Twitter account. And I believe the college will also be reposting some of their tweets. So keep an eye out, boost their followers, and keep in touch. Hope everyone stays well, and we will see you all soon. So thank you for attending. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.